Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe. If you dare.
Mom would get all dolled up, leave her wedding ring on the kitchen counter, and come home very late, clearly drunk, and sometimes brought men home with her that she introduced as her friends. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. Babysitters of Reddit, what seemingly normal parents had dark secrets?
Number 1.
Somewhat wholesome story. I used to babysit for the kids down the street when I was in high school. One night I went into the parents' bedroom to get something, I think a puzzle, and there was a book on the nightstand called How to Comfort Your Kids When You're Thinking of Divorce or something like that. The next time I was over, there was a book downstairs, on the mom's desk, that was the couple's therapist's guide to saving a failing relationship. It made me sad because the parents seemed really happy together whenever I saw them. I felt bad that they must have been going through a hard time behind the scenes. My parents had a pretty unhappy marriage, so I tried to be extra nice to the kids. I hoped they hadn't had to listen to their parents fighting. Anyway, this went on for a few months with no further indications of trouble. I felt like I knew this awful secret that the kids didn't know. One night I came over to babysit. The mom was in grad school and she had a class, and the same books were sitting on the counter. As the mom was leaving, she was like, "Oh, I can't forget the textbooks," and grabbed them off the counter. I actually didn't know what she was studying, so I asked what class she had. Turns out she was studying to be a couples and family therapist. The books I saw were her school books. In retrospect, that made complete sense because the titles were kind of academic, but I immediately assumed they were divorcing.
Number 2.
My daddy hits my mommy sometimes. For that one, I was still in high school. I told my mom what she said and my mom went to the police station to report it. I like it when you're here, not the other lady. She's mean and she makes me sit in the closet. This little girl was referring to her dad's girlfriend. I told the dad about it and never saw the girlfriend around again. And for some comic relief, my older brother and I play swords in the bathroom. Daddy taught us how. Asked him to show me with his action figures what he meant, expecting the worst, and he said look. And goes in his dad's closet and pulls out these giant foam swords. Phew. Thankfully not all in the same house.
Number 3.
I used to be a nanny for a family. At the interview they seemed totally normal, even the first day wasn't too terrible. I quickly realized that both parents were abusive. Mom had severe anger issues, and was medicated for some condition related to it. Dad was a borderline sexual predator who constantly talked about how gross looking his wife was, and how if she didn't stop being a bitch, he'd divorce her. Their kids were just as bad. One of them was also medicated for behavioral issues. I found out later that the reason they were hiring a nanny opposed to daycare was because their kids had been kicked out of the daycares in the area. Nope, the F out of that situation within a few months.
Number 4.
I nannied for this very rich family with 3 kids from the West Coast who would come to South Florida for summer vacation every year. The mother was in her 30s, clearly had her kids when she was young, and was very stereotypically hot, blonde, thin, big boobs, perfect teeth. Her husband was a little older, salt and pepper, super handsome, very George Clooney-esque. Their kids were all blonde-haired, blue-eyed, cute as F. They absolutely adored their parents. Dad would help the kids and mom settle in at the house and then fly back to Cali for work. I babysat 3 to 5 times a week, 6:30 p.m. to 2 a.m. Mom would get all dolled up, leave her wedding ring on the kitchen counter, and come home very late, clearly drunk, and sometimes brought men home with her that she introduced as her friends. She would often overpay me, which I never complained about, but I worried for the kids.
Number 5.
I babysat a lot when I was 13 to 15. At the time I lived in a small town. I was a very popular babysitter as I also worked at the daycare center. Often I would have kids from 2 or 3 different families at once. I didn't care. I got triple the pay for having 3 different groups of kids. I was recently told why I always had groups of kids like that. Turns out the small town had a swingers club and I was the go-to babysitter for their different groups.
Number 6.
Commenter. One family I still don't know what was up with them. It's like they were squatting in a model home or something. It was a fully furnished house that looked to be straight out of Better Homes and Gardens magazine, but there was nothing in the drawers, fridge or cabinets. No toiletries in the bathroom except for toilet paper, no food or silverware in the kitchen, no clothes in the closets or in the kids' drawers, and no toys. The lady just told me to order food for the kids and they watched TV. It was weird. Person B. It could have been a second home or, well, not very good parents.
Number 7.
I used to babysit for my next door neighbor who had an 8-year-old girl and a 5-year-old boy. I was 13 when I started babysitting for them, and I knew off the bat the kids were an interesting duo, to say the least, and I have too many stories to tell from when I was watching them. We all went to school together, so when we got off the bus, we'd walk to their apartment and I'd watch them, make sure we got homework done, and make them the snack of the day. One day, we had a half day at school, and I think the mom forgot, because when we walked into the apartment, I heard one of the doors shut. At the time, we thought it was an intruder, so I grabbed the 5-years baseball bat, told them to stay in the room, and I'd do some investigating. I opened the bathroom door, and there was the mom, half naked, with a guy that wasn't her husband. She gave me all the money in her wallet and her business card. She was a photographer, and told me to never speak of it again. I caught her cheating and made out with $400 and a $650 photo shoot package, took pictures for all the upcoming holidays so I could keep giving gifts to my family. I babysat them for about 3 months before they moved away.
Number 8.
I was babysitting once and the kids were wrestling in the living room. All of a sudden the smell of dank filled the room. I hear the kids stop and say, "What is that?" One of them had knocked over a big tin can on a shelf and the parents we'd stashed spilled everywhere. I sent the kids away and cleaned it all up for them and put it back.
Number 9.
Commenter. A family member of mine was a babysitter in the 70s. A couple who lived nearby asked her to babysit their baby a few times. I didn't get the sense that she knew them well. Every time she'd go they said the baby was sleeping and not to disturb the baby by checking on it. The baby never cried. The parents would come home and relieve her. She never saw or heard a baby. At the time I don't think my family member thought much of it, but has told me this story several times because it keeps nagging at her. How could a baby be asleep for the entire time she was there, every time? No noises. Nothing. Today, she thinks there must not have been a baby but has no idea why they'd hire her. Person B. We have babysitters come usually after the kids are asleep just because it's easier. Once they're sleeping through the night, they're not going to wake up randomly. Could have just been something like that. Also could have been a weird demon baby they didn't have any to unleash on the world but also just needed a night out to themselves. Demon babies can be exhausting.
Number 10.
Commenter. This reminds me of a weird babysitting job that I had once also in the 70s. I got a call from a woman who said that she got my number from a friend. She couldn't remember who, though. She sent a taxi to pick me up and I still remember feeling kind of freaked out, like this was very sketchy. The taxi pulled up at a very old apartment building. For some reason it totally reminded me of the building from Rosemary's Baby. There were 2 women there. The place was just one giant room with a kitchen and bathroom off of it. The lights were dim and the room seemed to be full of beds. But all of the beds were on angles, or pushed together, and there were tons of bedding and clothes all over the place. Whoever I spoke to on the phone told me that there was one 7-year-old boy. But I could clearly see that there were at least 5 kids aged about a year up to maybe 5. No boy who looked to anything close to 7. And all of the kids had longish hair and looked really neglected. The women didn't say much, except that they'd be back around 11 o'clock. It was only 6 o'clock in the evening and all of the kids were asleep and stayed asleep except for one toddler who woke up kind of whining, crying for a minute or two. I couldn't really tell how many kids were there. The blankets and beds were all crazy. There was no food in the fridge. No milk, no nothing. Nothing in the cupboards. There was no TV, which was a real hardship for me. There was only one book. I think it was called Every Woman's Handbook, and it was basically a feminist book about women's bodies. I sat there and read it since there was nothing else to do. After an hour or so I could hear this noise in the kitchen. It literally sounded like a man making demon noises through the kitchen sink drain. Totally scared the shit out of me. A 13-year-old me was certain that this woman hired me to stay there and then had someone try to scare me. This was Victoria, BC, during a time when everyone was talking about the satanic church being a big thing, and I was sure that these women, and the demonic sink talker, were Satanists and that I was going to get murdered that night. Oh, and did I mention that they didn't have a phone? The women came back promptly at 11 o'clock. They paid me a little bit more than what they said they would, which was fair since there were more kids than I was told. Altogether a really freaky night. I was blown away by the fact that the kids were asleep and stayed asleep. Did they drug them? They sent me home in a cab and I was scared for weeks that they were going to show up and kidnap me or ask me to babysit again. And I was never able to find out how they got my number. Person B. It could have been the upstairs neighbors draining their sink after washing dishes. I live in the same city and our sink does occasionally sound demonic.
Number 11.
I used to babysit when I was around 13 to 14-ish. My neighbors and 3 kids, ages 4, 7, and 11. The house was really nice, always clean and tidy. One time they asked me to babysit for a couple hours. Okay, no big deal. They paid me $6 an hour. When I got there they made the kids shake my hand and say thank you for babysitting us. I thought it was weird but it was whatever. The parents left and the kids wanted those dinosaur chicken nuggets so I made them some. As they were eating, the 7-year-old asked for a toy. She said it was in her parents' dresser. I didn't want to snoop around, but if she wanted the toy, I would get it for her. I went into the parents' room and found the dresser. I opened the first one and all I see are stacks of cash. Okay. Weird but not my business. I went back out to ask the girl what dresser drawer it was in. She goes over and literally points at the second drawer and says, "Oh, don't open that one, it has bags of sugar in it." That's what I hear mommy say. I was like, oh. Okay then. She grabs her toy from the 4th drawer and runs off. I did take a peek in the drawer and sure enough, under the socks were bags of cocaine. I was shocked but I didn't say anything. I put everything back where it was and left the room. When the parents got back I took the cash and left. Never babysat there again. TLDR, babysat some kids and found cocaine in the parents' drawer. I babysit 3 to 5 times a week. You'd be surprised at how many sex toys I see. A lot of them are just out in the open. Like they forgot to hide them. I overnighted once in the guest bed at bondage straps. Parents totally forgot about that. That's not too surprising. But some of their kinks are. Probably the darkest was this 5-year-old girl I babysit. She was the victim of sexual assault for a couple of years by an aunt and uncle. No charges pressed or anything. Mom and dad just cut all contact with that side of the family. I live in a small town so I see the aunt pretty often. It's sickening. They understandably have a ton of cameras set up in their house now and aren't gone for more than a couple hours. The child has a very weird bedtime routine, which is how I found out. Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time.